Hello, everybody. This is Freya. Hello, Freya. This is Freya. My fuzzy co-star. And I'm Jason, and we're bringing you today's video. As always, guys, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. All that support really means a lot to us. So today we're going to do things a little bit differently. I hope this doesn't bore some of you guys. I'm going to try and do this maybe once a month if I can get enough support from some authors out there. But I'm basically doing almost a virtual interview. One of the fantastic authors that I've been talking about lately, Andrew Moriarty, he was kind enough to let me email him some questions, and he emailed me the answers. So so I'm going to present that to you guys. So it's kind of like I said, a proxy interview in a way. At some point, possibly, I may try and do like some telephonic interviews or something with some authors, but honestly, this way probably works out best for me, guys. I am slightly autistic, so I have a lot of difficulty with telephone calls, so this is more of my comfort zone. So let me begin. Again, I apologize if some of you guys find this boring. I find the authors just as fascinating as the books, and Andrew Moriarty is a fantastic author, an incredible author. So I really hope you guys go check him out. So here we go. This obviously may be a little bit longer than 10 minutes because some of the questions lead to some longer answers. So the first question I asked him is, and guys, there'll be some spoilers for his Jump Space Accountant series, so if you guys haven't read it yet, you might want to check it out before you watch this video. So the first question is, one of the distinguishing things with your books is how your characters, with a few exceptions such as Nicole, tend to think and plan their way through obstacles rather than crush their way through with overwhelming force. What made you want to write more cerebral while still tough in their own ways, characters, and storylines? So his answer, and it's one of the longer answers, is you cannot fight either geography or physics, and for any plan to succeed, you must take these into account and devise a solution that will work in the real world. He does have a lot of real-world stuff within his books, which leads to another question I ask a little bit later. One of my favorite classical science fiction stories is The Cold Equations, which I read many years ago, and it has stuck with me to this day. It's a great example of cerebral science fiction. In my former professional career, I worked in information systems, specifically network and network security. Despite what people think about the cloud as being this mystical place where magical things happen automatically, it's grounded in harsh realities of wires, cabling, plugs, space, height, width, temperature, power, and water. Water is not something you think of all that often. It's just someone else's computer, and that is something that a lot of people do not think about. And that computer has a physical presence somewhere. People forget that, and they assume that things will just magically happen if they wish, especially bosses, executives, politicians, and most customers. If you ordered 4 computers that each draw 20 amps of electricity and put them in a closet, and if that closet contains only one 20-amp electric circuit, then this will never work unless you pay an electrician to run new power lines to that specific physical place. And if you did not order the correct cables, nothing will work until the right ones come in from back order. This is my chicken and egg. Did my profession influence my worldview, or did the worldview put me in the profession? Either way, that's what's reflected in my writing. This is fiction, so people are supposed to suspend disbelief, but most people have a limited amount of disbelief to suspend, so I wanted to limit what unrealities they had to accept. You do need pieces of both. Jake and Jose, more thinkers than doers. Nadine is designed, for some reason I had Nicole in my head, but Nadine is designed to be pure reaction violence. Dashi is designed as a leader who understands how to use both pieces of the equation. That's one of the fascinating things with the Jump Space Accountant series, is just how cerebral these characters are. You can't get around their planning. You can't get around their planning. You can't get around their thinking, especially Jake as he gets a little bit older and more experienced. So question number 2, how did you come up with your distinct setting? The whole abandoned system, former empire that just disappeared, and all of a sudden they're stuck out in the middle of nowhere with limited resources. That's one thing I find fascinating about this one. So his answer, this is a long answer. I grew up in Canada, in a place called Nova Scotia. Canada was originally colonized by Europeans at the same time as the eastern United States, and in places such as Newfoundland and Annapolis Royal, Nova Scotia, earlier than most. But the colonies didn't grow as fast or as large as comparable U.S. ones. I blame the crappy weather myself. The largest city in eastern Canada, Halifax, was not colonized until 1749, by which time New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Charleston, and Savannah, among others, were substantial metropolises. As a result, within a few hours' drive of Halifax are villages or former villages that were founded as farming communities in the early 1600s, but never grew beyond a few hundred people and never became self-sustaining. Some have entirely disappeared, so all that's left is a roadside plaque by the side of the ocean and a bay where ships would come once or twice a year. Some of these places have cemeteries, and when you can make out the old headstones, you can see that entire families with the same last name were buried there for years, and that's just the ones wealthy enough to afford gravestones. They can be quite lonely places even today, and sometimes when I drove through, I would stop and walk through the graveyards and wonder what life was like growing up in these tiny little hamlets, never meeting people from outside your community except maybe once a year. They were mostly French, so even a substantial village of a couple hundred people, there would be one doctor from Paris, perhaps one lawyer from Lyon, and that would be it. People would leave, but no new people would arrive. He really paints an image, doesn't he? Then one day I thought, what if the trading ships stopped coming? What if there was a war in Europe, the French lost, and the warehouse in La Rochelle burned, so nobody knew whether or not there was a colony out here, or even which river to sail up to get here. Completely forgotten. They could feed themselves, plenty of farms, apples, things, some game, but how would you get new sewing needles? What would you do when your plow wore out? The local blacksmith could sharpen an existing plow, maybe make a new one if you got the iron, but where would you get the iron? You need a mine and a smelter for that. Things would go downhill, but slowly, because everything doesn't break at once. How would that affect the local power structure? You could trade with your neighbors, but they would be in the same place as you. It's a very interesting world he's painting, and I can see how that would lead into the system, the solar system that he bases Jump Space Accountant out of. It's pretty cool, actually. Question number 3. Despite clearly being very far future, you like to ground your stories with real-world problems and issues, from travel times, costs and times to lift items into and out of gravity wells, a lot more real-world science despite being far future, even things like power and energy issues, and of all things, it does pop up in Jump Space Accountant, lack of ammunition. Rather than a lot of far future hand-wavium, of course there's a little bit of it, but I tend to look at your books as closer to The Expanse than Star Trek. Was that a conscious choice or just how your mind works? He did kind of answer that when he answered the first question, but let's take a look. I consciously chose to have these things as grounded as possible within the limits of I was writing a book of fiction. To the best of my knowledge, all the technology in my novels have some sort of theoretical basis. As a quick little break, when I did go to college, I was an astrophysics and computer programming major, so that's one of the reasons that I'm a big fan of science fiction. So, because he mentioned something in here that's definitely very theoretical, but is theoretical. Fusion exists, it does, and a tokamak reactor design exists. Alcubierre has a basis in physics for faster than light drive. It is a theory. It's a theory that is used in a lot of science fiction because it's a pretty solid theory. It does not mean that it's possible. There's some things showing that it may not be possible, but our understanding of physics is pretty far out there. Of all the different ideas for potential faster than light travel, the Alcubierre drive is one of the best ones. It is probably the most likely of all the theories. Gauss weapons and mass drivers exist. They absolutely do. Railguns. Most of these things are not practical, nor do we have the engineering, but they're not complete fantasies. To me, science fiction is entertainment, and it's about conflict and problem solving. When I read something, I'll see that there is a problem and I'll wonder, what happens next? Or, how do I get out of this one? Giving people a blaster that has limited number of shots adds another problem for the character to overcome. And saying, that's a great idea, will you pay for it out of your budget, is the only surefire meeting stopper that I know. As Cicero said, the sinews of war, unlimited money. It's very, 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 very true. Very, very true. I'm also a vet, guys, and yeah, that's definitely. Is this going to come out of your budget? Is this going to come out of your people? Let's get this done. Cool. Are you supplying the people to do it? I mean, absolutely ways to completely stop things from happening. So fascinating. Definitely fascinating. The one of the things I really enjoy with his book is with his series is how real world and grounded things may be. There's another author that I've read, I've talked about many times on this channel, John Ringo, that one of his series that I have not talked about yet, he got a lot of flack for it because there was so much science in it, like 3 or 4 pages explaining the Higgs boson particle. All of a sudden my mouth doesn't work. A few pages explaining the Higgs boson particle. And Ringo's response to that, one, was to present his co-author that has multiple PhDs, but also to say, guys, science fiction. Science fiction. Science fiction. I mean, if it's not grounded in science, I think it's just far future fantasy. Mr. Moriarty's books are grounded in science. Question number 4. And I just couldn't help but ask this one. Why an accountant? Why an accountant? He's a jump space accountant. He's an accountant. And before I read his answer, one thing that I find interesting, and they say, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Every time I've stumbled across a fantastic book in a very niche area, such as when I came across, Battle Mage Farmer and Unorthodox Farming, all of a sudden I'm getting flooded with hundreds of farming book suggestions, farming fiction books suggestions. And since I finished Jump Space Accountant, I've actually gotten a few suggestions of other accountant-based books. I'm going to check out one of them. One of them looks halfway decent, so I'm going to check it out and just to see. But I got to tell you, Andrew Moriarty writes an incredible book, an incredible series that I can't imagine anyone else doing it. So his answer to why an accountant. I picked accountant because most people think it's boring. I do too. But I recognize that accounting is necessary in life and that often new ways of organizing things cause disruption. Advances in accounting and finance were great milestones in history. True. The joint stock company didn't exist till the Dutch invented it, and with it a small nation captured a great deal of the world. And as a writer, writing is much more like accounting. Day-to-day incremental gains, writing several thousand words every day steadily and consistently until you reach a conclusion. Okay? It's interesting as I was reading the series that, thinking back to my time at 20 years in management, upper management with multinational restaurant corporations, and even my time in the Army, accountants kind of run things in a way. And a skilled accountant, there's a reason forensic accounting exists. A skilled accountant can find things that nobody else can find. So, did make for a compelling character. So question number 5. Is Jump Space Accountant planned to be an ongoing series, or do you have a planned out finish line with the story? This popped in my head because once I finished the most recent one that I've already done a review on, it really felt like a good endpoint. Like it really felt like it definitely finished a story arc. It opened possibilities for many more story arcs, but it also felt like it could have been a good ending to the series. So I was curious to see if I want to know if he was going to keep writing more about Jake and Nadine and Dashi and Jose. Very curious about Jose. So that's where that question came from. So his answer. Jump Space Accountant was planned to be one book. I'm glad it wasn't, guys. I wanted to learn how to write, and the way to do that was to write a book. Therefore, write. That was the 3rd book I wrote. The first one was an abomination of which we will not speak. Something tells me somebody needs to get Andrew Moriarty drunk and find out about that first book. The second was too short, too simplistic, and had all sorts of issues, so it was shelved as well. The third, Transgalactic Insurance, was a complete book in itself, has a coherent if simplistic plot, and identifiable antagonists and protagonists. A real book. But I was exhausted when I completed it. There were some things that had come up during the writing that I wasn't sure about and didn't know how to resolve, so I just ignored them in the rush to completion. Rush to completion, that book took 2 years to write. I paid editors to edit Transgalactic Insurance and asked them for feedback. One of the questions I asked was, who is your favorite character and why? And one editor said, Dashi, because I think he has a secret and I want to know what it is. I thought, what secret? Who is he really? What's he trying to do? That led me to expand a number of assumptions I had made and try to build stories around them. Plus, Jake needed to work harder. A good start, but he still wasn't rich, famous, and didn't get the girl. I needed him to have more success. But bigger success equals bigger problems, right? Thinking back on book 1, I can see it. I can see how he didn't really plan on it being a series, and I'm glad he did, because those characters, once they got more fleshed out, and that's probably why I said book 2 was so much better than book 1, because book 1 was basically his inaugural book, and then book 3 got better, and it's just fascinating. So my last question is one that I would ask any author that I'm able to do this with. And if there's any authors out there that are interested, guys, please let me know. Please let me know. And I'm probably going to ask a few authors here and there. So look for an email at some point from me begging to answer a few questions for me. So the last question. Aside from your own books, what are some of your personal favorite books and authors? Now, I skimmed this list, guys, and there's some that I've talked about already on this channel, some that I will talk about on this channel, and some fantastic books, guys. So, this one will be a little bit longer. So, favorite authors, E.C. Tubb. I do not know that one. The Dumarest of Terror series, all 37 books in it. Wow, that's bigger than the Dresden Files. Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. Of course, I know Larry Niven. They must have written 100 books between them. David Weber, yeah, I've already talked about some David Weber books, and I intend to talk about more. David Drake, I've talked about some of his books. S.M. Sterling, have not talked about any Sterling books yet. All favorites of mine. Mercedes Lackey, I've talked about Mercedes, and Elizabeth Moon on the fantasy side, plus L.D. Modesta Jr. I thought it was L.D. Modesti, but I could be wrong, but fantastic author, absolutely. Dozens of authors with Baen Publishing, absolutely, guys. Baen Publishing, if you're a science fiction fan, Baen Publishing, B-A-E-N, they're your go-to. They are your go-to. And I've talked about quite a few that are published under Baen. Isaac Asimov, of course. The Martian, I've talked about Andrew something or other. The author's name escapes me, but yeah, I've already talked about The Martian and one of his other books. It's fantastic. Many Sea Stories, the Hornblower series by C.S. Forrester, the Aubrey Maturin series by Patrick O'Brien, the late Dewey Lambden in his Alan Lurie series, Douglas Reaman in all those World War II books, and under his Alexander Kent, the Balathol series. Lots of Scottish and English writers. Jack Higgins, I intend to talk about Jack Higgins and the Sean Devlin books. Absolutely fantastic series, and I actually picked up a couple of them at the last used bookstore just so I could show them to you guys. My last used bookstore trip, I should say. Neville Shute, Wilbur Smith from South Africa, his early ones. Every book by Alistair MacLean, Leon Uris, especially Mila 18 and Battlecry. For detective books, Lawrence Block, whom we've also talked about, absolutely fantastic, and John Sanford. I don't know if I've talked about John Sanford yet or not, but I 100% will. I've got an entire shelf down there full of John Sanford books that are actually all autographed. I have an autographed picture with the author. Awesome author. Sanford is a pen name, but an incredible author. So Lawrence Block, John Sanford. Only Sanford's early stuff. His later books are becoming impossibly bad. I don't ever want to knock an author, but I will say that the books that have been published over the last, let's say, 2-3 years. I'd say 2 years ago was the last time I read a Sanford book. And if you have lots of time, James Michener, yes, fantastic author. George MacDonald Fraser's Flashman series. And my favorite Canadian author, Donald Jack. Never heard of Donald Jack. I have to look him up. Hundreds of historical novels, plus dozens of Kindle Unlimited sci-fi that I read monthly. I hear you. I get 3 or 4 notifications a week of new books by authors I follow. I can't keep up. And many more. Thank you very much, Andrew, for answering these questions. I hope all of you guys find this entertaining. Hope it's not too boring for you guys, me just reading this stuff. I find it fascinating. And yeah, again, thank you, and thank everybody for watching. I appreciate it, and I appreciate every one of you guys. And we will catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye now.